Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Ilustrado podcast. In today's episode, we'll be discussing additional commentaries from the recently uploaded video titled The Faces of the Philippine Peso, which is now available on my main YouTube channel. Link is in the description below for those who haven't watched it yet. Also, this podcast is now available on Spotify and iTunes, so be sure to tune in. Now, before we begin today's topic, I would like to divide this episode into 3 parts. First one will be related to the content of my channel. Second one will be additional commentaries I haven't yet mentioned from the last episode, in this case about the Tranvia video. And third one will be additional commentaries for the new video. Timestamps will be available in the podcast description for those interested in skipping some parts of the episode. With regards to my channel, some viewers are requesting to make a Tagalog or Filipino version of the videos my channel has uploaded. To tell you the truth, I've been thinking about it for quite a while now, as I noticed that Filipinos understood their history better using their language. But unfortunately, it's easier said than done, as I have to time my Filipino dubbing with the video, unless of course I re-edit the video to properly match the audio with the visuals. As I'm still a small channel, it may take quite a while to create them, so in the meantime, be sure to share to your friends for a greater reach so that I could find the motivation to make Filipino versions of my videos. Speaking of which, as my audience continues to grow, I was thinking if I should make an online community group of sorts, like a subreddit or something similar, where fans and supporters can discuss with each other topics related to my channel. Now, the hard part of having this online community is moderating it. Ideally, I would like this community group to be self-moderating, that is, without any constant oversight from moderators. But realistically, this will not be possible, as most self-moderating groups tend to spiral out of control over time. So I had no other choice than to assign willing volunteers who would like to become mods in this group. I will try to create a poll on my main channel to check if my subscribers are interested in having this community group. Finally, I'll be uploading a separate corrections episode, probably about a week or 2 after the main video, depending on my availability moving forward. The format will be that I'll upload the main video and the supplementary podcast episode on the same day, then a week or 2 later, I'll upload the corrections episode. Let's go to some additional commentaries that I forgot to mention or wasn't included in the Tranvia video. Originally, the map portions of the video should be more visually detailed, featuring small 3D models of the city buildings and photos pinpointing the exact streets and alleyways where the Tranvia once ran. But I didn't follow through with this due to hardware limitations, as I mentioned in the previous podcast episode when discussing my attempts to extract data from OpenStreetMap. I also forgot to include an animation that shows the portions of the Corregidor tram line running from Malinta Tunnel to the hospital, which was a design mistake on my part as I expect that there will be people who aren't familiar with the location of these sites on the island. As for the Tranvia extension proposals, except for the ones that were already built, the locations of the proposed lines are just guesstimates, since there were no comprehensive plans during my research as to where exactly these lines will be placed, especially given the state of the places outside Manila, which was mostly rural at the time. I noticed that some Filipinos have different ways of pronouncing the word Tranvia. Most would go to the Filipinized version, Tranvia, instead of the Spanish pronunciation of Tranvia, with an emphasis on the V portion of the word. Although there was a particularly funny exception made by, I think it was Connie Season from GMA's Balitang Hari news show way back in 2015, where she pronounced the word as Tranvaya, which made me cringe while watching that news segment. But I will forgive her on that, as she was merely reading from the teleprompter, and probably not aware of the existence of the Tranvia back then. Also, I would like to apologize for the slight mistake I made about the name of the barangay in Malabon. It should be Hulong Duhat, not Hulong Dagat, as for some reason, I accidentally typed the word Dagat while I was researching about the Tranvia and forgot to recheck it after. As for the location of the La Princesa Tabacalera, it's technically Malabon Elementary School and not the high school as mentioned in the video. But since both the elementary and high schools are beside one another, I just let that one slide in the meantime. I also did include the stations in the tranvia lines, as I don't have enough data to fact check their locations. There's a 1938 map made by Meralco which outlines the streets, as well as a tranvia ticket listing the stops. But I decided to not include them, as I couldn't precisely locate them on the map. Though there were existing photos of these stations, such as the one in Plaza Lacton and Loton, near what is now Liwasang Bonifacio, they were only few and far between, and not enough to pinpoint their exact locations. Unless I could find more documents pertaining to the tranvia stations, preferably from Meralco or any archive for that matter, then I could at least revisit this topic in the future. I also would like to give a shout out to railway engineer Paul Allen Patriarca, who reached out to me directly that they have a proposal in reviving the tranvia. It was presented during the second Philippine Railway Conference, organized by the DOTR, ADB, and JICA. I've already pinned this video in the comment section of my video, so feel free to check it out. And with that out of the way, let's begin with our podcast episode about the faces of the Philippine peso. I would like to say that this was one of the hardest videos that I've made so far, as I have to juggle around various biographies from different periods in Filipino history, accidentally creating a biographical anthology of sorts in order to make a story about the lives featured in the Philippine peso. You may also notice that the background music and sound effects are a bit loud and monotonous. A big mistake on my part, as I rushed the entire process just to immediately upload a video, which I wasn't able to include while I was making the animations. Moving forward, I'll be more cautious in the inclusion of the music and sound effects, as I'm still finding the sweet spot on the proper audio of my videos. Now, the reason as to why it became difficult is because initially, I wanted to use Wikipedia articles as a source, but being a historical researcher, I felt compelled to use biographical books written about these figures instead, as my research instincts pushed me to rely on secondary sources. Also, I noticed that some of the Wikipedia articles are sometimes written like blog posts that often show the biases of the editor, which is problematic on my end as some paragraphs don't contain sources in the first place, or if they have sources, either they are unreliable or often lead to dead links. And what was supposed to be a 10-minute video unexpectedly turned into an almost 40-minute documentary, hence bloating this entire video project. Originally, I was supposed to structure it with a separate biography for each individual, but I realized that it would make the video feel too monotonous, so I decided to organize them per theme. I already omitted some parts and tried my best to shorten their biographies, but the video was still quite long, so I had no other choice but to stick with this video's length. You may also notice that some parts of the video use the same background music at the same time. This is because I still don't have the budget to subscribe to websites that offer quality background music, so I'm still sticking to the same BGMs made by Kevin MacLeod, until I, as also mentioned in one of my previous podcasts, could afford such subscriptions or compose my own. Some history-savvy viewers of my channel will also notice that I use the NHCP facsimile covers of Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo, as the original covers of these books are a whole can of worms worth discussing in future videos. I didn't include in the video on the process of choosing the figures in the banknotes. The common assumption was that the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, or the NHCP, was the one who decides on who should be included in the banknotes. But upon asking fellow historians and colleagues who work in the said agency, the NHCP is only an advisory body who only recommends to the BSP. The final decision maker is its monetary board. And as mentioned in the video, it all depends on the political realities and trends of the period. Fortunately, I managed to find a PDF booklet of sorts published by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, which categorizes the figures per theme. I made some slight modifications on how they divide them in order to make it more cohesive and organized in the video. For more familiar individuals such as Rizal and Mabini, I decided to make it short since these figures are often taught in most history or Alaring Panlipunan classes. And there are also a ton of documentaries, movies, TV shows, and the sheer volume of literature available, which can be overwhelming. An example of this is the numerous biographies written about Rizal, such as those by Guerrero, Coates, Craig, Aquino, Zaide, among others. To simplify my research in order to save my sanity, I decided to focus on Zaide and Coates in the meantime, as the latter is being sold by the University of the Philippines Press, translated into Tagalog or Filipino by Nilo Ocampo. Zaide's work, meanwhile, while widely used, has been criticized by many historians for its embellishments and overtly reverential portrayal or simping of Rizal as a near mythical figure. That said, I found it to be an easy read for the making of this video, even though it does have its own flaws, such as the occasional repetition of information that was already covered a few pages earlier. For a more comprehensive and engaging biography, I personally recommend Leon Maria Guerrero's book, The First Filipino, a biography of Jose Rizal, with an official publication from the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, and also Professor Ambet Ocampo's books and articles in his Looking Back series, as I personally like their writing styles more. But for lesser-known individuals, finding books can be challenging to the limited number of available sources I can access. However, it's important to recognize that some sources, especially when working with non-scholarly books like autobiographies, carries with it some degree of bias, which presents a more personal or subjective perspective from the author. One example of this is the mini booklet about Ninoy Aquino, published by the Benigno S. Aquino Jr. Foundation, which read like a tribute or obituary piece reviewing Ninoy too much, which is a bit obvious given the booklet's publication origins. But I decided to add it in my sources in the description below for those interested in additional readings. So I use other sources like related literature about the period as my supplementary source in verifying their biographies. I was fortunate to have access to the vast number of libraries in UP Diliman, which houses many out-of-print books. Some of the sources I used came from UP's library search engine, Tuklas, which includes Richard Mexel's book on the life of General Vicente Lim. So a huge shout out to the University of the Philippines Library System for making these resources available. And also a huge shout out to the librarians at the UP Diliman Asian Center and UP Filipiniana book section who assisted me in re-accessing the book again in Tuklas due to a technical error in the system. Mexel's book is a great resource for those interested not only in the life of General Lim, but also the formation of the Philippine Army during the Commonwealth period. However, my main issue with the book is that it covers so many topics that sometimes you might forget you're actually reading about Lim after several lengthy paragraphs. Somewhat similar to when I was watching Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy, where you often forget about Bilbo Baggins and his gang throughout the movies. I understand that it's written for readers unfamiliar with Filipino history, but I decided to skip some sections that weren't relevant to the video, such as the origins of the Philippine Scouts from its Macabebe roots, or the biographies of other individuals mentioned in the book. A review by Professor Maria Felisa Tan in Ateneo's Philippine Studies Journal summarizes it best about Vicente Lim's life in a couple of paragraphs, so be sure to check it out in JSTOR for those interested. Initially, I didn't have a copy of Desiree Cua Benipayo's book, Honor, The Legacy of Jose Abad Santos, as I assumed that it would always be available in most bookstores near me. However, I quickly realized that my assumption was wrong, probably the Mandela effect at play. So I decided to purchase a copy online and use it as one of my bases for Abad Santos' biography. Some interesting facts I discovered during my research in this video. There's a paper published by historian Mina Roses where at one point in Diosdado Macapagal's presidency, he became a staunch opponent of the influential Lopez family as part of his moral regeneration drive. In her paper titled Kinship Politics in Post-War Philippines, the Lopez Family, 1945-1989, published in the Cambridge University Press Modern Asian Studies Journal, he warned the so-called Lopez Sugar Bloc against engaging in organized power politics to promote their interests. The feud had raged for 4 years, which cost Macapagal his re-election. I'll put the paper in the description for those interested. In one of the pictures in the video where Diosdado Macapagal attended the 1972 Constitutional Convention, Dick Gordon was among those in the picture. For those who don't know, Richard Dick Gordon was a former senator and current chairman of Philippine Red Cross, and he's quite active in most, if not all, of the humanitarian and emergency efforts done by the organization. It was quite surprising when I was mining some media photos and footage for my video, as he looked so young in the picture. So if Dick Gordon is listening to this podcast, big shout out to him and to the Philippine Red Cross for helping thousands of Filipinos in time of need. Hashtag ipasok si Dick. I read this paper about Osmeña's role in the Philippine Revolution, written by the renowned historian Rizal B. Mujares, titled Reinventing the Revolution, Sergio Osmeña and Post-Revolutionary Intellectuals in the Philippines, published in the University of San Carlos Philippine Quarterly of Culture and Society Journal. In the paper, Mujares examines how the meaning of the revolution was reshaped by the Filipino elites in the first half of the 20th century. Despite Osmeña's ambivalent, sometimes outright hostile stance towards the revolution, the paper explains how Osmeña rebranded himself by emphasizing his involvement with the revolutionary leaders such as Aguinaldo, as mentioned in the video. I will include a link of the paper on the description for those interested in reading it. With regards to Jose Abad Santos, one interesting detail about him is that his last name, Abad Santos, was a compound name created by his father, Vicente, to distinguish their family from the other Santoses in the Philippines. But despite this, it didn't always work, as people often mistook Abad for his maiden or middle name. His brother, Pedro Abad Santos, was a prominent Marxist politician and mentor to Luis Taruc, who would later establish the Hukbalahap guerrilla movement, initially fighting the Japanese and later opposing the Philippine government in Central Luzon. Rewinding back a couple of decades, Pedro served under General Maximino Hizon during the Philippine Revolution, where he, in this case General Hizon, led forces in Pampangas against the Spaniards and later the Americans. This led to the general's capture in 1900 and subsequent exile in Guam, where he died in 1901. One interesting story about Jose is when he was being educated by the Yankee teachers during his youth, whereby some of the elders call Jose and his colleagues Sajonistas or Saxons, due to these younger generations of Filipinos educated by these Anglo-Saxon Americans. Some of these Sajonistas would go on to become pensionados, as mentioned in the video. And if I recall, one of these pensionados, apart from Jose Abad Santos, was also Carlos P. Romulo, the most well-known diplomat in the Philippines. Also, at the age of 16, he was appointed as teacher or maestro in a small barrio with a meager salary of 9 pesos a month. Fast forward to 1919, Jose Abad Santos played a pivotal role in drafting the constitution and bylaws of the Philippine Women's University, Asia's first private, non-sectarian institution for women. During the Japanese invasion of the Philippines, he played a critical role when President Quezon and Vice President Osmeña took their second-term oaths in Corregidor's Malinda Tunnel. He was tasked with disposing of money, gold, and silver bullion to prevent them from falling into Japanese hands. There's also an entire episode about his life shown in the educational TV series Bayani, which you can watch on the Knowledge Channel. According to Mina Roses again in the book chapter Gender, Nation, and the Politics of Dress in 20th Century Philippines, Josefa Llanes Escoda always wear her attractive Filipino mestizo dresses wherever she went. Because of this, Escoda and her colleagues were often identified in their caricatures as famously wearing such dresses. This chapter is a part of the book titled The Politics of Dress in Asia and the Americas, edited by Nina Roses and Luis Edwards. The Girl Scouts of the Philippines always paid tribute to Josefa Llanes Escoda by celebrating her birthday every 28th of September. And that's all the time we have for this episode. For more information, please check the description for the sources and additional readings that I've used. Once again, this is the Ilustrado Podcast, signing off.